Wait for that. Cool. We are recording, so usual rules when recording. If you want to talk about something which you don't want recorded, let me know. Or if you want me to stop recording anytime, also let me know. So welcome everyone to the UK Azure Virtual Desktop User Group. This is the October edition. I think we've been going pretty much a year now, which is really, really cool. Constantly new people attending, which is nice to see as well. Okay, so today this is our agenda. So I'm not sure where Kirk is. So normally I have my little sidekick, Kirk Ryan, but he's not joined. So I presume he's tied up with family or something. So this is the lineup that we're going to do tonight. So we've got myself and Kirk, virtual Kirk, who's not present. I'm just going to do a bit of introduction for people who haven't attended this before. Then I'm going to go through the news. Which, to be honest with you, there isn't much of. I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but sort of Azure Virtual Desktop definitely seems to slow down recently. I guess after the initial launch, sort of pushing new features, starting to really slow down now. I've noticed that like I've been struggling to find content with the community newsletter and stuff. So it's definitely in that kind of general release cycle when we won't get stuff developed as fast, but obviously stuff will keep on trickling along. So that's quite interesting to see. And then we've got Rory Monaghan with us. He's going to talk to us about his sort of adventures with native Azure Active Directory join, which is a super interesting subject. It went GA recently with Microsoft, so it's really interesting to see where this is going to go. But I can imagine this starting to become extremely popular. As sort of new developments start to roll out. Obviously, it has its limitations, which I'm sure Rory's going to cover as part of his presentation as well. And we've got James O'Regan with us from IGEL. He's going to talk to us about IGEL devices and how to connect to those on Azure Virtual Desktop. And then at the end, we've got a bit of a Q&A. So again, if you want to talk about anything, I don't care. Even if it's non-tech, I still don't care. If you want to talk to people, talk to anyone, your cat, your dog, anything, I don't care. But chat, feel free. Okay. So let's get going. So we'll do quick introductions. Again, a lot of you have joined before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. So my name's Neil McLaughlin. I work as the UK field CTO for Nerdio. I'm the co-founder of this AVD community and also the UK AVD user group, which I'm sure some of you have heard of. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and you can find me on Twitter at virtualmike and AVD community on those websites. Also, if you want to email me, you can reach me at nmclaughlin@getnerdio.com. That's Kirk, but he's not here, so everyone say hi to Kirk. I'm not sure where he is, but hi, Kirk. So yeah, I'm going to fly through these, but these are just basically what we go through. So on the first Thursday of every month we meet, we just not changed it. The latest WD news and hot topics, obviously Teams, and we do recording to slides or we're recording. So if you want to disappear, if your wife tells you off for doing work past 6 o'clock or something, just feel free to leave and we can catch the recording later. But that's fine. Hopefully some physical events sometime in Q1 2021. I need to change that to Q1 2022, but we'll see about that, whether that happens or not. Hopefully it will be soon. It'd be nice to have some kind of event somewhere, either down south in London or somewhere up north, or whether the biggest primary vote is, I'd guess. So content, I'm always looking for content. So if you've got something you want to share as part of this user group, please let me know. Again, I'm finding it really difficult to find presenters at the moment. So when this group first started and when there's lots of stuff to talk about, it was literally a line of people. I was booked up 3 months in advance. Again, that's trickled down to literally nothing. So if you do have something you want to talk about, it doesn't have to be direct, or I guess it's indirectly related to Azure Virtual Desktop. That's cool. Or it doesn't have to be long. It can be 10, 5, 15, 20 minutes. If you've never presented before, that's fine. So we're doing this for the community. So if you want to share something, a customer success story or something that you learned or a quick tip or anything, just contact myself and we can get you scheduled in as well. Okay, and we've also got a Slack channel. So if you want to join our Slack channel, you can have some good conversations go on there related to Azure Virtual Desktop as well. So sort of daily activities going on there as well. So That's the URL for that one. Right, so in this month, I'm just going to cover the what's new with news this month. So again, not a great month to share. Again, it's about just a handful of topics this month. So nothing kind of major apart from the Windows 11 releases. So let's go into that. So so the relaunch, due to some personal stuff going on recently, I've not had any time to do this. So we're hoping still to do this within the next couple of weeks or so. We've actually got 2 new members on the virtual desktop sort of community, which should now be known as. So we've got Bazwan Cam, who's joined us also. So he's going to sort of be helping out with the website and content and stuff like that, and a few other people as well. So we're hoping to really sort of get up and running with that very, very soon. But bear with me. I know I've been saying this probably for the past 6 weeks, but time has not been very good on my hands recently. So, but hopefully then the week after next, I thought we'll go live with that. So, but keep your eye out for that stuff. So we're going to be producing lots of different content. Again, weekly newsletters, podcasts, sort of members of the month, study series, YouTube channels, all that kind of stuff. But we'll see how that goes once some time frees up in my calendar. And so we've also got a new version of Nadia. Obviously, I won't be doing my job if I didn't tell you about this. So we've got Nadia Managed Enterprise version 3.2. So we've got some pretty cool new features in there. So we've got a Azure AD join support for multi-session and FS Logics. Not had looked into this yet, but I think basically what we're doing is something a bit sneaky. Instead of using the Azure files for the domain join, they're basically using the storage blob accounts, blob storage, and then setting permissions on there. So I've not looked into that yet, but it looks really, really cool. User-driven multi-session host pools auto scaling, which basically means start VM on Connect when the users start up, and when the users log off, the VM shuts down automatically. So you can actually pay for resources when you need to. So it saves you a lot of money. And some other stuff as well there. So this is a release note. So if you want to know about this more, let me know, have a chat, and I can show you, give you a demo or something. Also, we are getting closer to TechFest. So AVD TechFest is happening in November, if I remember rightly. So sessions are still open. So if you want to present, I think Rory, you're presenting, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Yep.
Yep. Cool. So if you want to present and submit a session, looks like it's going to be a really, really cool event with lots of great content. Azure Active Directory domain join is now GA. Obviously, this is tonight's topic that we're going to talk about. So if you want to use that in your production environments, again, there are a few caveats to think about that. So I'm sure Robert's going to go through those, but the biggest one is obviously you don't have any sort of is FS Logics. Because the Microsoft release schedule isn't quite there yet with the storage accounts, and that's why obviously you can't use it with that. So, and there's a few other small ones as well, so be careful of that. I mean, you could probably use it, but it's probably a bit useless in a production environment, I would say, which I'm sure Rory's conclusion is going to be as well. But there are some other stuff which you need to do beforehand to get it to work properly as well. But I think this is the sort of first cycle of Microsoft making this the full solution. We've got a few more things coming. So I'm guessing towards the beginning of next year, we'll start seeing mass adoption when all those sort of limitations have been lifted. And also, we've got Azure price and calculator updates. If anyone's ever tried to use that, it's a bit horrible. You should use an earlier one. It's a lot better. But they've added in the storage calculation. So if anyone knows when they price up a Azure virtual desktop environment, the storage can be quite a big component of it. So they've added it in there as well, so you can look at your sort of FS Logic storage and your managed OS disk as well, just to give you a better idea of the pricing for your Azure virtual desktop environments. And the final one is Windows 11 on AVD is now GA. So that's available. So these are 3 versions that they've put out there. It's the Windows 11 Enterprise, 11 Enterprise Multi-Session, and the Windows 11 Enterprise Multi-Session and M365 apps. So you can now use that and deploy that. I'm not sure if you noticed Microsoft's mistake there when they did the marketing material for that, but they basically published a blog article saying Windows Azure Virtual Desktop is now GA or something. So that's quite funny to see, but I think we fixed that now anyway. So as I said, there's not really been much news this month. I think a lot of focus has been on sort of the Windows 365. Sort of as I said before, features are starting to slow down now for the Azure Virtual Desktop. Now we seem to have gone into kind of the mainstream. Okay, so now we are going to go on to our presenters. So anyone got anything to mention or anything you want to talk about before we begin our sessions? Nope. Okay, good. So now we have Rory. So Rory has been around for a long time. He seems to know a lot about a lot of stuff. So he's going to here to talk about Azure AD Join on Azure Virtual Desktop. So Rory, all yours.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Jack of all trades, master of none is the term, I think. Let me try to figure out this Teams now. So
which should have a share desktop icon.
Yeah, I do, and I'm clicking it. Share content. Come on. Okay. Oh shit. My whole monitor went black.
Are you on a Mac?
No, I'm not. I'm on Windows. Can you see my desktop now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see it.
That's a bit weird. Okay.
Cool. We can only see your actual PowerPoint. You need to go to full screen. I think just need to swap it out. Yeah.
Is there okay? Yeah. Is there?
I can see your presenter view.
Okay. Is there maybe a bit of a delay?
It. Got it.
Yeah. Okay. I think there's a delay.
Okay.
Yeah, but we'll work through it. Cool. Well, yep. Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me. Thanks for everyone for attending. The session that I'm going to be covering today is approaching the future of Azure Active Directory only. My name is Rory Monaghan. I'm from the west of Ireland, a town called Galway. I host a weekly podcast that covers all the highlights in enterprise IT news, as well as some community content like some cool scripts, tricks, and tips. I blog at rorymon.com. I work full-time in the technical marketing team at ControlUp. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at RoryMon. A quick look at what I intend to cover today. So I'll do a very high-level introduction to Azure Active Directory Join, which I may refer to as AADJ because it's a bit of a mouthful, but it should be quick. It's important for getting to Azure Active Directory only in AVD and also Windows 365 Cloud PC context. But this being an AVD user group, I figure you guys are probably already pretty technical and in the know. The main focus of my session is to focus on the reality of working with only Azure Active Directory with no tie back to a traditional Active Directory domain. We'll take a look at some of the current limitations of AADJ for VMs and AVD. We'll talk about the Cloud PC business SKU, which is currently Azure Active Directory only right now. We will contemplate a future state of being AAD only and what some of the benefits of doing that may be. I'll do some demos of what I've got in my lab today for managing my AAD joined desktops. And finally, talk about some of the obstacles that medium to large size and even some small size enterprises will need to clear to make use of this and reap the benefits from it. So if you set up Azure Virtual Desktop months or maybe even years ago, which it's crazy to think that WVD has been around for years now, just seems like with COVID, it's just been like a time warp and so much time is lost. But you may have found at the time when you were setting it up back then that the setup was pretty complex, particularly if you weren't using a product like Nerdio to streamline and automate a lot of the setup for you. From a setup perspective, one stumbling block that some had run into was their reliance or requirement for a VPN configuration to allow line of sight from the service back to their on-prem Active Directory. Others may have opted to run Active Directory hosted within Azure, like spin up some VMs with domain controllers, and more leveraged Azure Active Directory domain services. In my opinion, with kind of a long-term vision and obviously we'll talk why maybe things aren't where they need to be for this to be achievable for many. But with a long-term vision, the way we do things right now to support the traditional Active Directory is quite convoluted, and particularly for those leveraging the AADDS, it's also needlessly expensive. A few weeks ago, Azure Active Directory domain join VMs and Azure Virtual Desktop became generally available, like Neil said, and this has potentially significant benefits and implications for existing and future AVD customers, but possibly more so in the future for reasons we'll talk about, some limitations. Before we talk about limitations, let's just kind of look at a high level at the feature. So from an admin perspective, it is pretty simple to implement Azure AD join VMs and AVD. When creating a host pool, as you select to add new virtual machines, you will see there is now an option to select Azure Active Directory from the dropdown. You will need to set a custom RDP property and ensure your users are assigned to the virtual machine user login role, and anyone who requires the administrative privileges will need the virtual machine administrator login role. When I and others tested in the past, we also found that we needed to have a registry setting on our hosts and even on the client device too for something called PKUT2U, which I knew I was going to mess up, which stands for public key user to user, and it's used during the authentication. So I think Steve Seifru, I mess up his name all the time, has a really good blog post on authentication in this scenario, and he covers that. And I think I saw Tom Hickling I saw a chat pop up from him. He's got probably the best blog post on the topic of Azure Active Directory domain join as well. I do find the requirement, if you do need to set that registry, particularly for the PKU2U, particularly if it's for like a remote worker who, that's an endpoint that maybe you can't touch or manage right now, depending on what you're using for managing remote workers, which is a topic we'll also get into because that is definitely becoming a long-term need. You need to be able to do things like set the registry or set a policy or configure a remote endpoint to use some features. But if you don't have a means to do that, setting this might be a little bit of a stick in the spoke of the wheels. The VMs, once provisioned, are added to Azure Active Directory, the Azure Active Directory in the tenant that you're using when you created the host pool and your VMs. So no real extra configurations. It's not like old ways of doing things where you're provisioning maybe old traditional desktops and you got to go through the sysprep and configure the domain join to your domain and all this. This is really simple. You can even also you can see the radio button on the screenshot, but you can have them also automatically enroll for management with Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which we'll also talk about a little bit later. But like I said, Tom certainly has the best blog post that I've found on the topic, and his blog is zenithhit.blogpost.com. I'll try to put it in the chat.
I've just put it in the chat.
Perfect, thank you. Cool. Yeah, and I can't see the chat, so but that doesn't matter. Okay, so on the VM itself, what you'll see when you log in, if you're able to see this stuff, and obviously logged in with your Azure AD credentials since it's Azure AD only in this state, but you'll see no real signs of a traditional domain join machine. Your profile is prefixed with Azure AD, where the domain prefix would usually be. There's no sign of the machine being joined to a domain. Instead, you'll see in the access worker school that the device is connected to your Azure AD. And also you'll see, I blanked out my SID, but within the user group or the users on the machine, you'll see this Azure AD/user with a SID for the user. Now, so what I did want to focus on is maybe some of the current limitations, what are the obstacles, as well as get into demos and maybe talk about future state as well. So on the current limitations, and Neil already talked about one, but We'll start with if you're not yet rocking ARM for your management, you won't be able to leverage AADJ. You cannot provide a virtual desktop to an external user who's not in your Azure Active Directory, which I don't know how common that really is. Like, obviously, it's something, if you can't do it, they should call it out. I don't know how many enterprise organizations are inviting external users to use these types of desktops. I guess maybe if they have contractors and they don't put them in their tenant or something like that, but I wouldn't think it's a huge issue, but I might be wrong. Right now, obviously, the biggest one I think would probably be the fact that only local profiles are supported currently, which I'd imagine has to be a pretty big blocker, particularly for those who are already using AVD and they're using FSLogix. So maybe you could try it out in a new host pool just to test with, but probably not going to be rolling to production until that's resolved. AADJ can't access Azure files, which Neil talked about. And he was talking about storage accounts. And it's not just FSLogix that kind of loses out in that situation, but MSIX app attach. So when you're in the Azure console and you've got that MSIX packages option, currently you're going to be using the NetApp solution or Azure Files. And I believe with the Azure Files, you need to have the computers with read-only access. And when you try to give the permissions, it's going to warn you about Kerberos authentication being required, which obviously in an Azure AD only situation, that's not something you can configure, at least as of yet. I've heard that that's going to be coming, so fingers crossed. Let's see, the Windows Store client isn't supported. How big a deal that is? Probably not a huge deal to most in the enterprise, at least based off my experience. And finally, single sign-on is not supported, which I don't think that's a major showstopper. It's a bit of a bummer. It's something I'm sure that's going to be supported relatively soon. But you will definitely notice that kind of lack of convenience when you're launching your desktop. So AADJ was in private preview earlier in the summer and moved into public preview around the time of the Windows 365 announcements, which came around mid-July, I believe. On August 2nd, Cloud PC was launched with the Cloud PC Business SKU being Azure AD only. In mid-September, just a few weeks ago, Azure Active Directory joined VMs for AVD became generally available. So the Cloud PC Business SKU has been Azure AD only for quite a few weeks now before it became generally available within AVD. And I feel like that some of the user experience and admin experience, if you have had the chance to be using Cloud PC over the last couple of months, may be a glimpse of the future for AVD and just even using Azure Active Directory only for desktop as a service in general. And my demos will be actually using the Cloud PC business desktop that's Azure AD only. Back in July, around the time of the initial Cloud PC announcement, I had already been trying out the preview of Azure Active Directory domain join. Based on that and some of the high-level announcements at the event, I wrote up this piece on what I thought a Cloud PC could be like without having actually used the Cloud PC. This obviously a few weeks beforehand, so I didn't have any like insider knowledge or anything like that. But some of the topics that I picked up on or what I was suggesting that I would like in a Cloud PC was the fact that you could have fewer Azure resources. So what if you could genuinely just pay for the desktop for the month and not required to pay for any additional Azure resources? At a high level, the appeal of Cloud PC is that it's supposed to be a monthly flat fee. But if you have to support some maybe somewhat legacy ways of doing things, you may find yourself needing to add in additional resources to support your users with the things that they're currently working with and using. And then all of a sudden your monthly spend becomes less predictable again. Well, with Azure Active Directory only, you won't require any additional VMs hosting domain controllers or AADDS, which can be erratic, and particularly the last one can be pretty crazy pricing wise. With AADJ, you could feasibly just deploy the base images from the Azure Image Gallery. So really, no custom image might be necessary if it was to be implemented in the correct way. Now, this isn't quite there yet. I think it's something that can be achieved in the future and hopefully will be. But it'd be great if you didn't have to roll your own image, and maybe you could just kind of blow away the desktops every month and like rebuild them with the latest image that has all the patches, and then just dynamically layer in everything your users needs, like your policies, your applications, and all that good stuff. They had talked about Microsoft Endpoint Manager during the announcement. So I was like, oh, that would be kind of cool. So you could maybe use Microsoft Endpoint Manager for some basic management. And the reason at the time that I said, well, basic management was because I find that mem can be kind of slow for certain actions. So it's pretty quick at doing things like, executing a remote scan with Defender, but the application deployments can vary. It could take, 15 minutes, or the most that I've seen is about 30 minutes. I assume it could be more if it's quite a large application. I'm guessing, I don't have insider knowledge. I'm guessing maybe there's a need to propagate the package if you're uploading it at the time when you're doing the deployment. Maybe it's got to replicate across these different sites in order to deploy to the devices, but that could be quite slow, and we'll talk a little bit about that during the demo as well. In the blog post, I also talked about layering in third-party cloud services. Now, I focused mainly on vendor cloud products because that way there'd be no requirement to spin up additional VMs and resources in order to support it. And if it's a cloud service, hopefully it's, pay a flat fee per month. So it keeps your pricing overall for providing the desktop and also managing the desktop as like a predictable flat fee. No surprises. Now, that was just my vision at the time. It hasn't fully been realized yet with what's out there, but a lot of the building blocks for that are actually in place right now. I don't think it would take much more to get there. And with that, let's get to a demo. And let me turn this off. Okay. Cool. So for this demo, I'm going to be using my cloud PC. This is just the business SKU, the business edition. I've got 2 vCPU, 8 gigs of memory, and 128 gig storage. I picked that one because it seemed like it was kind of middle of the road, shouldn't be all that expensive, and it should be performant enough for the majority of people who would need to use it. And over here, I've got my Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Now, I have Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and under my devices, Windows devices, where are you? Okay, I've actually got a couple devices in here, but I've got my cloud PC device in here, and you'll see, oh, I thought it was actually going to open. I was going to say, you'll see that this right now is not doing anything because for the sake of this demo, I'm using the business SKU. It's Azure Active Directory only. It is not currently supported, at least that's the last I heard when I was asking on a webinar that Scott Manchester was doing, but it's not currently supported for the business SKU of the cloud PC. It does work though. It doesn't work with the Windows 365 menu for doing like the custom image management and some of that good stuff. But it does work if you enroll it as a regular Windows device, and you could just deploy applications that way. You can manage the AV. You can do a bunch of things in there. Something that's currently missing with the business SKU because it's running in this unsupported fashion is some of the analytics reporting as well. But let's get to my cloud PC here. I've got my AVD desktops, but I've also got this cloud PC. So first up, there's the single sign-on that's not available yet. Hopefully that's going to be streamlined. Okay, I'm into my cloud PC here. So what I was talking about was kind of MEM. It's pretty good for doing some of the base stuff, but I was kind of thinking of the idea of, well, what would I ideally use for some of this stuff? Like, some of the AVD partners that are out there, like PolicyPack, for example. I know that already supports desktop as a service. I know Numescent for application delivery is already a Microsoft partner for AVD as well. So I was like, well, what if I just kind of roll these into my business desktop just to see if it would work with Azure Active Directory only? And they work pretty well. It would actually probably work even better in an Azure Active Directory domain join VM in AVD for some reasons too, because I think AVD is maybe a little more enterprise friendly right now than this business desktop is. But you could see over here, I've got my cloud paging player, but let's start with maybe some policy management on this desktop. And this, dang it. There we go. Okay. I'll go over here and it's going to MFA me. I knew this would happen because for security purposes, which it's not a bad thing, this forces me to re-MFA every few minutes. So let me do that. And it's going to expire. Ooh, got in just in time. So I've got PolicyPack here. If you're not familiar with PolicyPack, it's a really great product as well for just everything on-prem policy management. So they have a lot of their own built-in features that they've created, but more than that, it also makes just kind of general Windows group policy or Microsoft group policy a lot easier to use, a lot easier to search through, and it just kind of cuts out a lot of the confusion. Like one of my big confusions just using group policy in general is sometimes there might be 2 or 3 policies that overlap and can do the same thing, but maybe in a slightly different way. So which one do you actually use? It can be kind of a cluster to use. PolicyPack kind of cuts out a lot of that, makes it a lot more streamlined. Also, if you're in the process of maybe cleaning out your AD practices, or maybe, hey, if you're moving to Azure Active Directory only in the future and you want to get away from some of your bad practices in the past, like having way too many group policies and maybe not using group policy preferences, which typically are faster to use, this actually makes that a lot easier too. It makes it very easy to use things like item level targeting, using some of the group policy preferences. It's a really awesome product. But I want to show you some of what I've done with the policy settings here. So for example, I'll go into the editor. So I've done things just kind of in my base, like I was contemplating maybe using AppV for some applications and kind of mixing that with cloud paging and what I'd hoped was going to be MSIX app attach at the time. And I know that Ryan Mangan's on the call. That's definitely a possibility that I want to entertain. So Ryan, I need to talk to you about trying out that product to get the MSIX app attach working. But I've enabled the AppV client. I've done things like, set that it should check for Windows updates. Yep. Okay. Yeah, checking for definition updates and basically managing the things that I care about for my base policy. I could have done a lot more to make it more enterprise-like, but whatever. Simple policy here. They've got a really, really easy to use file type association setting. So, in the newer Windows operating systems, it's kind of convoluted with the XML and all that stuff for the start menu, taskbar, some of the default FTAs. They've kind of cut through some of that and made it a lot easier. So I've set this FTA, for example, for just PDF to my installed Adobe Acrobat Reader DC. And if I go over to the desktop, you'll see some of these policies are applying, but we're also going to go through and create some new policies. So my PDF is opening up there. Let's see. I've got my AVD client is in there. Also very handy to help you onboard if you ever contemplate using Policy Pack. They set a few policies just out of the box for you to make sure that it's working and everything's as expected. So if I do PP Cloud Sync, we can see some of the policies that have also got applied here. They've got someone that's showing off some of their features, like blocking certain websites, redirecting between browsers, which will also show, and a lot of cool stuff. But maybe, for example, I haven't actually tested this, but I saw Facebook. I don't think I've tested in this browser. Facebook blocked from a policy, and there's a bunch of stuff just out of the box that is really easy to do. But let's try and create some new policies. And by the way, it's got my machine in here. So obviously it's not like traditional group policy where the machine's in an Active Directory OU. I've installed a client-side extension, so it's not even a full agent, a client-side extension onto this desktop and merely added it in to the cloud tenant here for Policy Pack. And I can go and just create and link a new policy. Let's do something pretty simple to begin with. So what if I create a new shortcut? Just do demo. Okay. Fat finger it. System 32 calc. So I'll just do this fast and ugly shortcut. And now let's go back to the desktop. Now some of the policies can take about 10 seconds to apply, but some are pretty quick. So hopefully you don't get, oh, did I apply it? Oh, I did. Okay, there we go. So here's a shortcut on my desktop. Like I said, it was an ugly, dirty shortcut. I didn't put a nice icon on it, but it's a working shortcut. Now I used the update one. I probably should have used something else because if I remove that policy now, that shortcut's probably going to stay behind. But yeah, I could remove or disable, maybe unlink and remove it. I can also maybe look at some of the cool unique features here to Policy Pack. So let's create and link a new policy. And this time we'll use their browser router feature that makes this very, very simple. Let's create a new browser router policy. And we'll call it Google to Google. I'm going to have it enabled. And I'll use an actual wildcard here. So let's do everything that contains Google. And I'm going to select Google Chrome. So what I'm expecting to work, if the demo gods are on my side, is that if I try to go to, say, Internet Explorer or something on my machine and attempt to go to a site like google.com, something with Google, it should redirect me to Google Chrome. And this could be handy if for some reason, I assume people who are going to Cloud PC or Azure Virtual Desktop are not in the situation that they're still relying on IE or something like that. But some enterprise customers maybe still rely on IE for certain sites that have ActiveX, but they don't want people using it for just general browsing. Well, you might be able to use the browser redirection or the browser router to change that behavior. So you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. And I can rename the policy as well to something that is maybe more suitable for myself. So we'll just do Google browser reroute. Okay. Here we go. So that should be set. I'm guessing the shortcut's going to stay behind. Yeah, because I used update. But we should be seeing probably within 10 seconds. I'll give it a few seconds and then I'll go into Internet Explorer and try to go to Google. But we should be seeing that when I go there, it's going to launch it over in Google Chrome instead. So like I was saying, if you do need to keep IE11 around for some reason, or even it works with other browsers too. So if you're, for some reason, maybe keeping Chrome out there for something and you want them to really use Edge as the default, so you don't want them to do general browsing there, maybe you just redirect back to Edge for some sites. So let's take a look. I think it's been long enough. There we go. Just like that, in a flash, it's moved from IE to Chrome. So cool stuff. It does a lot more. Now, in the Cloud PC business SKU at the moment, you're an admin. So you'll see, I don't want to show it because it's got the SID. You know, I'm a little paranoid. But if I was to go into the local admins group, my Azure AD Rory account is an admin on this box on this business cloud PC, which is obviously not optimal. But on AVD, obviously you'd have the users set to the user role, not to the admin role. And you could use something called the least privilege manager within policy pack. And if there's like a need for allowing them to do a specific install for an approved application, you can allow that, but block all other installs. You could do things like get down to a very kind of granular by the process level and say, okay, block these processes. It's almost like app locker on steroids. It's very, very feature rich. It can be a real asset for defending against things like ransomware by just basically only allowing processes that should be allowed to actually run and keep things very kind of locked down and secured. They've got some really great videos on their website on policypack.com for the least privilege manager, which is probably the biggest feature, particularly for AVD. It's not something I thought I should demo here on this cloud PC because, like I said, I'm a local admin and some of its ability would be kind of lost in this demo. But with that, I also wanted to show Numescent cloud paging for application delivery. So if you've been to any of my sessions on application packaging delivery, that's kind of my main area of expertise over the years. I spent a lot of time with like AppV, ThinApp, MSI packaging, doing a little bit with MSIX. And typically with those products, one of the challenges has been the fact that you can't get all of your applications to work. So if you sequence them in AppV, not all of them are going to work. If you package your existing applications into MSIX, not all of them are going to have to work. So you may have these kind of virtualized, containerized, and dynamically delivered applications for some of your apps, but then for the other apps, it's going to be more like the traditional local installs, which can kind of suck because then that leads to, you know, maybe you have to use mem, for example, and not a huge knock on mem. I do like it for doing some stuff, but for example, if I was to reset my desktop here, my cloud PC, I would lose everything. I'd have to re-enroll and wait for all my applications to install again. Not very good, not the best way to do things, not going to be as fast as dynamically delivering the applications. If I had to locally install applications like into an image, all of a sudden you've got multiple images, so you're kind of getting away from that concept that I talked about of what if you could just use the public image from the Azure image gallery? Wouldn't that be awesome? Don't futz with any image management over and over again if you don't have to. That'd be great in the future. Probably not realistic right now, but one component that can help keep you in line for just delivering all the apps really that you want to dynamically delivered with Numescent cloud paging. So on this desktop right now, I don't have any applications delivered with Numescent cloud paging. Okay. Let me go over here. Don't worry, that's a temporary password. I'll go to Edge because I think I have it saved there. Yep. Okay. Cool. So I have a few applications here. I didn't do a PDF printer, but that's one of the ones I like to show. So something like Foxit Phantom PDF or Adobe Acrobat Pro DC, where you're able to generate and PDFs, convert PDFs, print to PDF, and all that kind of thing. Well, typically that would be a challenge with something like AppV or ThinApp because they couldn't handle drivers. When the mess in cloud paging, it handles drivers no problem. With AppV, you can do things like COM plus component services. With NuMess and cloud paging, it's not a problem. And I know that like the layering products, like Citrix App Layering, App Volumes, and FlexApp, they get a very high rate of compatibility if you're not dynamically delivering the applications in. So if you're putting them into the published layered image or kind of doing it on event, you get a very high rate of success. But the rate of success deteriorates when you're dynamically delivering them. Whereas with NuMess and cloud paging, I haven't found an application that I haven't been able to deliver with it yet. And it still provides that ability to dynamically deliver the applications. So just kind of a quick example here. And it's kind of extra ideal for Cloud PC, because if I was to launch this application for the first time, it's just downloading a small stub file, this exe. And then when I open the file, the first time, if you were to launch it on a brand new clean machine, it would check to see if the cloud paging player is there. And if it's not, it will install it. And you saw how quick that was. I mean, Notepad++ isn't a huge application by any means, but I mean, while that splash screen was up there, it was doing its check to see if the cloud paging player was there because I have that option enabled. I could disable it if I knew I was going to have the cloud paging player available in the image. But in this instance, I'm doing that check. I'm adding the application in and dynamically delivering it and launching it. And it's lightning quick. I've been using applications like Camtasia, that's quite beefy, SQL Management Studio, which can be a challenge because of how the licensing is handled, Snagit, anything I've thrown at it, including Epic Hyperspace, which I tried working in healthcare, it has handled it no problem. Other like WriteFax, popular in healthcare as well, because believe it or not, they still use fax. That's got a driver. I've thrown the kitchen sink at it, and I've yet to find an application that will not work. There is a cloud paging user group that we've started, and I know my buddy Tamim, who's based in the UK, works at a bank, and they haven't found an app. They haven't been able to do with it. I know Chris Smith, who's also in the UK, is part of the user group. He hasn't found an app. Now, it doesn't mean that there's apps that you won't deliver this way, because in some situations you might think, maybe I'll just put this one in the image. Maybe I don't want that one to be like launched or delivered in this way. Perhaps it's something like a VPN client, which you want to make available to your endpoints. You know, you could actually still get that to work as cloud paging. I've tried that, but that's something you might want to allow the vendor to automatically update. Something that's maybe you don't necessarily want to have to manage the update. You could manage the update. It's pretty easy to do, but maybe you don't want to. Okay, and yeah, I mean, I did launch it from the web there, but once it's launched we should see the shortcut is in there, which that's one of the, I guess, not ideal points. So right now you have to go to this web portal. I'm not sure if that's going to change in the future. I hope it does, to do the initial launch. Actually not a big deal for the cloud PC because since it's persistent, I mean, they could just go to that portal and launch whatever apps and see what apps are available to them, launch them, and then they'll have them in the start menu and just be able to use them from then on. For a non-persistent desktop, they do support non-persistent desktops. You will have to do some configuration on the agent to have that type of persistence and to work in the kind of shared content store mode that you might be familiar with AppV. Okay, let's see. And I will speed through this next part because I work for ControlUp and I'm cognizant of not turning this into a ControlUp session because this is my own personal time, not their time. But yeah, before I move on, we do this cloud paging user group. Our next meeting, it's not up there yet, but it's going to be on November 5th. We reached out to Numescent and asked, because the majority of people say they're beginners, we asked if they'd be able to provide some free training to get people, experienced and get some insight into packaging with the product. And they have agreed to that. So I'm hoping maybe the 12th or the Friday after that to get that free training. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, join the event on November 5th to hear more. But yeah, let's maybe go over here. And actually what I'll do first. So we talked, I think, in the news, talking a little bit about some of the analytics, and I know there's analytics available within Microsoft Endpoint Manager as well. I found like some of the reports are pretty good. It's kind of on demand though. Doesn't really cover everything. So I was kind of looking at ways to enrich some of the monitoring and kind of make it a more kind of all-around solution for the employee experience management. And ControlUp have a product called Remote DX. It currently only supports Citrix and VMware, but support is coming for Azure Virtual Desktop and for that protocol. So check this out. So one of the main problems when you're supporting a remote workforce is, at least what I experienced, people will call up and say, hey, my desktop disconnected multiple times today. Hey, my desktop is slow. Citrix is slow, the old classic, but AVD is slow. My Azure Virtual Desktop closed randomly multiple times today. And then it kind of becomes a bit of a pissing contest because they're saying things like, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, oh, my kids are streaming Netflix, no problem. I'm on YouTube and it's working, no problem. So my internet's working fine. It's just your desktop that's a problem. So, there's nothing for me to do. I can't be productive and it's your fault, not mine. Or my desktop has closed multiple times. There's nothing wrong with what I have. So they've got this really cool feature called Remote DX. And if I look here, I could see this client score is shown red. And if I go in here, you get this really cool visualization that includes Wi-Fi signal strength and also the latency between that person's actual endpoint, which looks like a Mac, and the router in their house, as well as from the router out to the internet, so to Google's like public DNS 8888. And you can also see the total latency from their endpoint into, say, if it's going to be in the future an Azure Virtual Desktop. In this case, it's a desktop, I believe, that's delivered with Citrix PBS. And these metrics are real time as well. I think the update about every 9 or 10 seconds from this, because it depends on Windows. It's collecting some of the metrics from the actual endpoint in order to update them. But yeah, it really takes a lot of the guesswork out of, why is this happening? And you can actually observe what their performance is like at that time. So kind of cool stuff there. There's also this that I want to show you. Let me see. It logged me out. Just go in with my generic admin here. So this is in my own tenant because I was doing some pretty cool stuff over here. So they've also got this relatively new, the newest of the products called Edge DX. That it's a great product for managing physical endpoints, and they can be remote too. So it is a public hosted solution. You'll have an API key, and it allows the endpoint to talk to the cloud-hosted Edge DX. But you get some really, really great rich metrics on things like you could go further. You know, that person who was complaining about performance on their desktop. Well, if it's not enough and maybe you're using VPN or something like that on the device and you think the VPN might be a problem and you want to be able to see some of the data when the machine goes offline, perhaps the full agent Edge DX could be good. You could see things like the average input delay, which, you know, that's common if an application is slow and you try to click file or go to another menu and the application just kind of hangs. The keyboard, when you're typing, you know, you're typing away, but nothing's appearing for several seconds, or the mouse is staggered. So that's a pretty good indication of that. It supports Mac OS, Linux, IGEL OS devices, Stratadesk, and obviously Windows devices as well. And it also gives you some of that network performance, like your Wi-Fi signal strength, if I was on Wi-Fi, which I'm not, and a whole lot more. But I put this on my cloud PC as well. Kind of makes sense to. Why not? This is Azure AD only. My cloud PC is kind of like a physical endpoint. They call it a PC. So I was like, oh, what would this be like? And you can see that it is indeed returning a lot of interesting metrics. And by the way, for kind of shits and giggles, I put this on a cloud PC. I put this on a Cameo desktop, or sorry, Cameo server. I put this on the new Tanix WeFrame machine, and just to see, oh, this could be kind of useful, kind of rich data to have. You can see the geographical location, the data center it's running in. You could see stuff like the Wi-Fi performance again, SID. You could see like the security level of the Wi-Fi that's being running on. If the disk on the endpoint or the PC is encrypted or not, stuff like that. User input delay again. A lot of really great metrics. I'm not going to labor this, I promise. But you can also do things like remotely log off your AVD or cloud PC user, disconnect them, reboot the machine, send a message, provide remote support. So if you want to shadow the machine or take control, you can do that from here. There's some really rich reports as well. So you can look at things like installed applications, missing patches, device events. You can even do things like create your own custom reports, and you can basically, if it's a metric on a machine, you can create a report to retrieve it. But you can do things like look at missing patches on those remote endpoints that maybe you thought you lost visibility of, track the location history. A whole lot of stuff is possible within this. And also, you have the ability to create scripts. Now, you could run them on your AVD if you want. If you're using Nerdio, you could use Nerdio for running scripts on the AVD. You could have this then on the endpoint, be it an IGEL machine, perhaps an actual Windows laptop, or even a Mac OS machine. And you can use a whole variety of different scripting languages. You know, PowerShell, VB script, JScript, command script here on this machine. This is Windows, but also there's Mac OS. And what I actually really like now is the fact that PowerShell is supported across Mac OS and Linux as well. So if you want to keep one common, you could do PowerShell for all and use that. And you can run these based off trigger events. So, you know, network state change, and you want to throw a notification to the user, hey, you know, maybe you need to go closer to your Wi-Fi. You could do that. You can do pretty much anything if you're scripting savvy. And if you're already a ControlUp customer and you use the ControlUp script library, that kind of automation is probably not foreign to you. And finally, in the demos, before I go back to the last slide, I was also toying with the idea and created this just for this session. But ControlUp has this ScoutBees product that does some proactive synthetic monitoring. So you can create synthetic tests. And I can actually show you just how simple that is. So you do have the ability to do these EUC tests. Right now, it's only supporting Citrix and VMware, but essentially it could be like an end-to-end test of like launching an application from Citrix, from VMware. The cool thing is you can do it from one of these cloud hives, or if you want to install your own hive, you can install it like on a local network or on whatever network you want and do the test from there. But doing the test from the Cloud Hive is very, very simple. You can actually be up and running with this within minutes. It's really, really cool. Let's say we'll do London, and maybe we'll do HTTPS. I think it's HTTPS on Teams, right? So teams.microsoft.com. Teams. Yes, check. And let's set it to run every 2 minutes. So pretty cool here as well, and something that I've used and I'll show you for AVD. But you can check custom headers. You could check a string and a response. So if like a vendor like Microsoft, for example, has an API for showing the health of a service, you could also check the health of that service right here through this synthetic test. But let's just go and we'll make it pretty simple. We could say on failure, you could change the alert policy, and maybe you want to exclude things that have like a 25% or 50% packet loss, because a lot of these cloud products, for example, they change the routing quite often, and maybe you don't want to alert every time a packet drops when they're changing the route, or at least that's been my experience. But I could also send an alert to my teams. I could send an email or use a webhook method if you want to integrate with something else. Okay, so I'll let that run, but let's check what I've got here. So I actually created some synthetic tests on some of the Azure Active Directory services, like the login. There's this Anchor service. I'm not exactly sure what it does, but Microsoft has a list of the Azure AD services that are used. There's also this one here, the AVD broker. So it's not the Azure Active Directory, but it's the broker for AVD. And like I said, if I come in here and show you guys, they have this public API. And if I check this API, you can see it actually reports within the text here, this JSON. It reports the global health of the Azure Virtual Desktop Broker. So what I did was check to make sure it's healthy, and if it's not healthy, then that's going to be a failure and it should be alerted. But you can see the AVD broker, at least for the last 24 hours. Let's maybe go a bit further back. Yeah, it looks like it's in a pretty healthy state. If there are any failures, you could click in here, but you can also see, even though there were no failures, you could see the response time plotted out here over the last 2 days. I could change the duration. I could see the time to first bytes, response timings. I'm cognizant I don't want to take too long on this part. But, you know, other services that I'm using as well, like Policy Pack, like Office 365, like MEM, like my Control Up Edge DX, basically everything that I might care about for providing this cloud service, I could check as well. So it looks like, yep, that Teams synthetic test that we created that's going to run every 2 minutes has run its first test, and it has been successful. And to give you an idea, I also have my own website in here. I could check like the DNS, I could do ping, I could do HTTPS, and I could see like some failures in here. So I've set my own threshold here for what I'm expecting the response time to be, and also what I'm expecting the number of redirects to be as well. And I'm maybe scrutinizing this more than you might for some other services that you monitor, and that's because I'm paying for hosting. So I want to know if like performance is dipping so I can go back to my host provider and say, hey, what gives? But we can see here, it's not too bad. Looks like pretty early in the morning for the most part. But let's have a look at 1 a.m., for example. So this particular failure was because it timed out. So I had a threshold, I believe, of about 10 seconds, and it didn't respond within the 10 seconds, so it deemed that a failure. I could be more forgiving and raise that and whatever, but you can kind of get the idea of the power of having some of this data. There's also an API available for Scout Bees, so if you want to put it into your own boards or perhaps put it into an automated process, you can actually have spin up your desktops within Azure, your VMs within Azure, and also have it automatically create a Scout to monitor as well if you want to. But that's it for the demo. Last slide here. So to end, I will say that I think that Azure Active Directory only right now could be an attractive option for startups who are maybe not currently invested into the Microsoft ecosystem. For example, those who maybe only provide Okta to their users right now and have all SaaS-based applications. Maybe they're using G Suite.
Rory, we're not seeing your slide.
Oh.
I can still see the control screen. Well, that might be my web client. Can anyone else see the slide?
Yeah,
I can see it.
I can see the slide, Neil.
Ah, okay. Must be my my client.
It's cool. Yeah, it's probably that delay from earlier. Well, hopefully everyone else is seeing it, but yeah, I mean, for startups who are maybe using just Okta for SaaS applications, maybe they're using G Suite right now, but they're interested in switching to Teams. Teams seems to be becoming very popular. Office 365, that might drive more of them towards Azure Virtual Desktop or maybe even Cloud PC in the future. Well, in the past, AVD may not have been attractive to them due to the Active Directory requirement. If you've gone from only using Okta and you're saying, well, I want to see if I want to go to AVD, that seems pretty attractive. We're growing. I should be on maybe a more enterprise legit product. And then you see, wait, I'm going to have to set up my own like on-prem Active Directory. That's not something I'm going to do. But now with Azure Active Directory only and Azure Active Directory domain join, there's a suitable path forward for them. But with that said, for many small to large enterprise organizations who are currently Microsoft Enterprise customers, Azure AD only may be some way off. It doesn't have to be a pie in the sky dream, but it may take some time. Obstacles include things like map network drives. Now, I have to say that things like home drives should really be replaced with OneDrive. Map network drives for applications should be looked at and possibly switched over to OneDrive or SharePoint or something like that. I actually, like I said, I was working in healthcare. They're very cloud averse in healthcare, but even some of those vendors had started to support storing files within their applications into cloud storage or SharePoint Online. So I don't think it's a million years away, but if you've got some of those legacy requirements, then it's going to be an obstacle for you. For file shares, the obvious option would be something like NetApp for Azure or Azure Files. But as already stated, unless you're with Nerdio 3.2 by the sounds of things, there's a current limitation using that with Azure AD. Azure AD only. Let's see. Obviously, traditional SQL servers that require Active Directory users, service accounts, and possibly machine accounts to be added for permissions would not work in Azure Active Directory scenario. You could publish those apps from on-prem using maybe Remote App, Citrix Virtual Apps, Horizon Apps, or whatever you have. In the long run, perhaps those applications could be switched to a SaaS alternative, or at least support a cloud-based database. Backend servers like on-prem web servers, application servers, etc., will likely require a traditional domain. You may need to publish those apps that require that to if there is no SaaS version available. And of course, some applications only work on the domain too. I think the last few of these obstacles will be cleared sooner than some may think. The move toward cloud-hosted subscription models for enterprise apps is already well underway. Microsoft have seemed to suggest that Azure Files to support Azure AD only is on the way, and map network drives, in my opinion, are frankly bad practice in enterprise on-prem anyway. It just slows down the logons. So I think if you focus on like map network drives and file shares and just kind of rid yourself of those evils, that would be a big step towards an Azure AD only future. And then maybe in the meantime, in the short term to medium term, you have a solution where you're publishing some applications via remote app on-prem or possibly Citrix virtual apps or whatever you have. But yeah, it's not, I don't think it's a million years away by any means. So a little icon. I think it will be achievable in the future. I think layering in some of these products that I showed, like cloud paging, for example, for dynamically delivering the apps, could make some of this stuff a lot easier. Nerdio as well, obviously going to streamline things and provide that extra value in there as well. And that's it for my session.
Cool, awesome. Thanks, Rory.
Thank you.
Great topic, and certainly one that a lot of people are going to be interested in. We've got a few comments in the thing. And also, I mean, Tom Hicklin's been mentioned as well during the sessions that the Azure AD Join and Azure Files and FS Objects, that's going into public preview
cool.
in October. So hopefully over the next 2 or 3 weeks, hopefully. Have you got anything to add on that, Tom?
Yeah, not specifically, just that's coming. So I would suggest if this is something that people want, just look out for a blog article and some tweets, no doubt, just to say that started, and just go and kick the tires on that.
Cool. Thanks. Looking forward to that. It's going to be really, really cool. Okay. Has anyone got any more questions before we head over to our next guests? Any comments? No. Cool. All right, James, over to you.
I have unmuted myself. Okay. Thanks, Neil. All right. How am I going to do this? Okay. Let's see. Bear with me 1 second. Oh, no. Sorry, I'm just trying to connect. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
All right. Okay. Thanks, everyone. So thanks, Neil, for the invite. It's really great to have this opportunity to present and give people a bit of information about IGEL and how we work with AVD. So the title of this session is Life on the Edge, how IGEL is the perfect solution for accessing AVD and Cloud PC. My name is James O'Regan. I'm a technical solutions architect at IGEL. I live in Dublin, which is in Ireland. I've worked in IT for about the past 20 years. I'm on, you can see my Twitter handle there. As I said, I'm quite involved with the community. I'm a Citrix CTA, and I'm the co-leader of the Irish Citrix user group. And I also host a video podcast, and I generally attend and speak at events like E2E when they occurred in person. So I'm really looking forward to in-person events coming back, hopefully later this year and into next year. So just to kind of give you, I'm not sure why would you choose IGEL? So basically IGEL, it's a platform independent solution. It can run on any compatible x86 64-bit 86 device. It's basically running Linux, so it's very secure from the outset. It's got a very minimal attack surface, and it's read only, and it's modular. In terms of management, we have what we call our universal management suite. So it's basically a console sitting on either a Windows or a Linux server, and allows you to deploy configurations to multiple devices. and it's very easy to be able to do that. We can integrate with any cloud, any protocol and peripheral, and just give you an idea. These are the main cloud providers and we're all about kind of this whole work from anywhere scenario. So just to give you in terms of where we are with Microsoft. So Microsoft and ourselves have quite a deep relationship. And in terms of where we are with AVD, obviously when it was launched, it was WVD. So at Ignite in 2019, we were announced as the first Linux-based operating system that was supported for WVD. And we've continued on with that integration, and we have a lot of we've direct conversations going on between our development team, who are based in Germany, and obviously Microsoft's development team in Redmond. So it's a collaborative process in terms of bringing out what we have within our operating system. Basically, as I said, you're using a Linux operating system. It can either run the main ways it runs is essentially, it can be on a fully converted device, or you can do a temporary conversion of a device using what we call, we have a small USB stick called a UD Pocket. And what we've seen, obviously, in terms of things like, obviously we've seen with COVID, we've seen this mass, migration to working from home. And we've seen all sorts of scenarios where people were working and, all sorts of crazy things, from people taking domain joined PCs home and all that kind of thing. And, they're basically not being able to talk to the domain after a couple of weeks. So what we've seen is, we've seen this massive big work from home initiative. And what the UD Pocket essentially, so instead of doing a full conversion on a device, a person can basically have their own device, and you just plug in the UD Pocket. You make one change in the BIOS, it launches you into a secure IGEL session. Within that IGEL session, you can then have your connection to AVD, and then connect into your AVD session. So and then at the end of the session, you just pull out the USB stick, and it converts back to what its previous state. So you can see it's very flexible in what we can use it for. So one of the big advantages of kind of IGEL is our alliances. And our alliances are with the likes of, obviously, as I said, I mentioned Microsoft. Rory was talking earlier about ControlUp and Remote DX and Edge DX. ControlUp are another one of our alliance partners, and we have, we're fully supported on those two, on Edge and Remote DX. And just basically, this gives you kind of a holistic approach to being able to utilize a secure desktop to access all of these different technologies. So just wanted to give you a basic overview of our architecture. As I said, we can either run on a Windows server or a Linux server, and obviously, what we're seeing now is we're doing development around getting, we've customers who are running it in the cloud as well, obviously, and a lot of them are running on Azure, whether that be on Windows or on Linux. So basically, you have our what we call our UMS server. And then you have a series of ports which it utilizes to talk to the endpoints. It comes with an embedded database, but obviously for enterprise level and high availability, you can utilize SQL or Oracle or any kind of mainstream database. Then we have a port built in to give you the kind of shadowing capability of the endpoints. So what we have is another piece of technology called our Cloud Gateway. So basically, as I said, the UMS is essentially where we do our configurations, and they're pushed out to endpoints. And that's generally for like a LAN network. So for this whole supporting work anywhere, our Cloud Gateway basically it's a Linux deployment. It basically sits in, it can sit in your DMZ or in cloud. In fact, it's available on Azure Marketplace. And, it basically allows you to manage devices that are outside your LAN. So it extends the capability of your UMS. So you can basically manage a device from anywhere. And that can be, a fully converted device, a UD Pocket, even like we have. So those are the two main offerings we have. So it just gives you that full kind of control of your endpoints, which obviously is huge in this day and age. So this is just to illustrate a bit more about our cloud gateway. As I said, it's internet facing, and then you can control devices anywhere essentially. So IGEL recently brought out our latest release, 11.06.100. And as I said, we've made quite a few enhancements, and there was a few specific ones around AVD, and I just want to highlight some of these to you. So basically, with our 11.06.100, we have full support for Windows 365 Cloud PC. Because obviously Cloud PC is built on an AVD platform, with our client, we were able to support it from day one. We've also introduced through another one of our partners, you're able to monitor your cloud your AVD sessions via systrack, and we have then content awareness via device trust, and we've got support for multi-monitors. So you can see we're evolving our AVD client on an ongoing basis. So I just want to switch here and go through a short demo to show you how easy this is. So essentially what you have here is you have an IGEL endpoint. It's got no configuration on it. So I simply go on to my controller. And then we have my device here. It's got a basic configuration on it. So what I can do is I can start customizing that. And what we have what we call profiles. Our profiles essentially have 7,000 different configurations, and you can apply as many or as few of those as you want to an endpoint. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a bit of customization. So I'm going to assign this here. So the options are, you've got now, you've got next, and then we have what we call jobs, which is basically the equivalent of like a scheduled task that you can then, pick a time when you want a configuration to be applied to the endpoints. And, you'll see how quickly you can start the customization process of an endpoint. So I'm just going to, now I'm going to click OK. Give this. In terms of profile here, just see in terms of creating an AVD session, I just simply go to AVD. I've got an AVD one request, so I can come out of that. I can apply that to my endpoint. Apply it now. So as you see, I've applied a background, just happens to be Windows 11, and then I've got my AVD client now configured on it. So I can launch my AVD client. So this is our this is our AVD client. It's fully customizable. You can apply your own backgrounds, logos to it, everything. So you can apply whatever kind of corporate logos, etc. to it. So. It's logging me in, and it's loading my workspaces that I currently have available, and I can just launch my my AVD session. And you can see I can just minimize that, and it's still running locally. And you've just seen basically how easy it was for me to get up and running in a very short space in time. And as I said, you can have those configurations applied to, our UD pockets, and they can be, configured on site and then given out to like staff remotely, and then, they have that capability. So what we've seen is quite a bit. We had a scenario recently. We were working with a customer. His laptop died. He had a UD pocket. He plugged in the UD pocket. He was able to boot that up, log in, access his AVD session, and then he was able to work away, even though the hardware had failed on his laptop. So just shows DR is definitely a scenario we're seeing more and more interest. And as I said, we're always working on our AVD solution. We've got various different things going on at the moment, and obviously, yeah. So I just wanted to. So that's just a very quick demo. My presentation. So I just wanted to briefly talk about something else, and that is around sustainability. Obviously, everyone's aware of where we are in terms of this whole climate crisis, etc. And we go on about things like airlines and that kind of thing, and about how they're bigger, but the IT industry is actually quite a big polluter, and some of these facts around it are quite shocking. So IT is responsible for about 2% of global CO2 emissions, which, as I said, is on a par with the aviation industry. IT consumes 10% of global power generation, and 33% of global power generation goes to end user devices. So over 300 million desktop and laptop class end user devices were manufactured in 2020, and around 1.3 billion mobile devices purchased in 2020. So just if we look a bit deeper at the manufacturing of a laptop. So manufacturing a single laptop produces 1/3 of a ton of CO2, and it also consumes about 190,000 liters of water. So, and the world generates about 54 metric tons of e-waste annually, which is the equivalent to throwing away over 1,000 laptops per second. These are crazy figures. And, if we look deeper, what causes this e-waste? We've got this pressure to upgrade consumer devices, device support and warranties, digital obsolescence, refresh cycles. So we kind of looked at this and, what's a different way? So one of the big things with IGEL is we give you the possibility to kind of extend the lifetime of an endpoint by 2-3 years. And we have different things where we have IGEL running on OS devices that are could be 10 years old. It doesn't really matter. So, and you can just see those facts and those really stark facts that our current kind of thing around the whole life cycle this refresh we go on. And obviously, it's not just from a climate perspective. We're all seeing globally this whole chip shortage, and the devices are just not there. There's a massive backlog in terms of trying to order any kind of device which has a chip in it. So, this is just an alternative look at it. It has the benefits of being more environmentally friendly, but also you have the availability and maybe to extend the life of a device due to such a thing as the current chip shortage. So, as I said, we did a study with a company called PX3. So what they found is using IGEL OS can reduce the energy consumption by about 22%. One of our customers, they extended the life of over 3,000 devices by 2 to 3 years, and that's basically the equivalent of removing pollution equivalent to driving a car with an internal combustion engine for over like 2.4 million miles. So in closing, we're all about basically extending the life of older hardware, and that enables you to access, AVD, VMware, Citrix, and then, you can utilize underpowered devices like the Dell 5020, or as I've mentioned, you have our UD Pocket for any kind of device you want to use. So the final thing I wanted to mention was just, obviously this is a community event, so we have our own community, which is a Slack-based community. It has approximately over 6,000 members at this stage, I think. And basically we've got various different channels and discussions around everything around IGEL, and all the various different integrations. And it's a really great resource. You've got, IGEL employees, you've got community members, and experts. And if there's anything kind of IGEL related, it's a really good resource. It also runs webinars and that kind of thing. And yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to show. So thank you all very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, James. I just had a slight disaster. My PC rebooted itself. And
Well, that's what you get for upgrading it.
I know. I'm
not backing it up.
But Teams is not working. I'm not having a great Windows 11 experience here. All right, cool. Yeah, cheers for that. I didn't catch the last of that, obviously, because I was busy, full on panic mode. But thanks for your presentation. I'm sure it was very, very good. Has anyone got any questions or anything you want to ask about tonight's sessions, or anything you want to discuss at all before we finish for the evening? No. Okay, good. Well, thank you all for attending. I appreciate you put out your personal time to do this. I think one thing which I'm fathoming about the idea is because quite a few people have mentioned that they can't make it because they have to put the kids to bed or doing dinner or something like that. So I may toy with the idea of adjusting the time a bit, maybe from something like from 4 till 6 p.m. rather than 6 till 8 p.m. Or maybe during the working day or something. I don't know, but we'll see. But if anyone's got any feedback on that, let me know what you think will be a better time. To sort of more people can make it so it doesn't sort of dip into their personal time. So that would be awesome if you could do that. Okay. On that note, I will end. So thank you very much for attending. I'm going to make the recording available. So, and as I said, I'm really struggling for sessions at the moment. So if anyone's got any sessions they want to present on, any interesting topics, I said it can be anything from 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 hours. I don't care. If you haven't presented, it's fine. So if there's anything interesting you want to talk about, case studies, anything, as long as it's kind of sort of related to Azure Virtual Desktop, I'm cool. So, all right, go and enjoy the rest of the evening with your family and have drink beer and watch TV and play with Azure Virtual Desktop or whatever you want to do. And I'll see you guys next month.
Thanks, Neil.
All right, cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.